Welcome to today's deep dive. We've got a really, just a fascinating mission today.
We really do.
Yeah, we're going to explore the profound psychology of childhood trauma, the origins of class shame, and how the human mind processes fear. And to do this, we're looking at a stack of excerpts from a very specific source.
Right, a very specific translation.
Exactly. A Turkish translation of Charles Dickens' classic Great Expectations. Specifically, we're exploring the edition published by Kansanat Yayınları, which is, the one you can always spot by that iconic little heart logo on the cover.
Oh, yeah, the heart logo. It's such a classic edition.
Yeah.
And it's a text that completely immerses you in the perspective of a child who is he's trying to decode a world run by deeply flawed and honestly often terrifying adults.
Seriously terrifying. But before we even look at the protagonist of this story, we actually have to look at the person who translated this specific edition, Nihal Yayınoğlu.
Yes, such a fascinating figure.
Right, because when you picture a translator of a towering literary classic, you might imagine, I don't know, a quiet, dutiful academic surrounded by dusty dictionaries.
Right, someone very traditional.
Exactly. But Yayınoğlu was born in 1927, and she actually published her very first novel by pretending to be a male American author named Vincent Ewing.
Which is just wild. And that lived experience of faking an identity to navigate a rigid social structure, perfectly mirrors the world we're stepping into with this story.
It really does.
She didn't just translate the words, she intuitively understood the core theme of the book, which is reinvention and the lengths we go to in order to escape our circumstances.
Yeah, that lived experience of faking an identity perfectly frames the world we're stepping into with Pip. So let's start by looking at how a child's mind tries to make sense of things it just doesn't have the tools to understand.
Right.
We find our protagonist, a young orphan boy named Pip, or Philip Pirrip, standing entirely alone in a desolate, freezing, marshy churchyard, and he has never even seen a picture of his parents.
So he is forced to construct his own reality. Like he literally tries to figure out what his parents looked like purely from the shape of the letters carved into their tombstones.
Which is so heartbreakingly childish. Because of the blocky, heavy font of his father's name, Pip decides his dad must have been a square, stout, dark man.
Right.
And then the flowing, delicate letters spelling his mother's name lead him to assume she was freckled and sickly.
And he even looks at the graves of his brothers, right?
Yes. The 5 tiny graves of his infant brothers. He concludes that they were all born on their backs with their hands stubbornly shoved in their pockets.
It really illustrates how a child craves concrete reality. I mean, Pip is utterly isolated, so he is building a family out of typography.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
He is trying to impose a very literal, childlike logic onto the absolute finality and, the abstract nature of death.
But that quiet internal logic gets shattered almost instantly because an escaped convict suddenly just violently grabs him from among the graves.
It's such a jarring scene.
It really is. And the sensory details here are just overwhelming for you as a reader. The man is limping with a heavy iron chained to his leg, his shoes are destroyed, and he is covered in mud and torn apart by briars.
And he physically dominates Pip. He shakes her upside down, empties his pockets, and demands a file and food.
Right, whittles, as he calls it.
Exactly. And the sheer terror of that moment is visceral. The convict is starving, freezing, and desperate. And he uses his overwhelming physical size to hold Pip in a way that it literally makes the church steeple seem to tumble to Pip's feet.
Like the whole world is turning upside down. But what really caught my attention, though, is that the convict doesn't just threaten Pip with his own fists.
No, he doesn't.
He invents an accomplice. He tells Pip there is a mythical young man out there who has a special taste for the hearts and livers of little boys.
Yeah, the young man.
Right, and he claims he is the only one keeping this young man from tearing Pip apart. So I'm trying to figure out, is this just pure cruelty or is it a calculated move? Like, why add a fictional monster when you are already a terrifying man with a leg iron?
Oh, it is a brilliantly desperate psychological tactic.
Yeah.
I mean, the convict knows he cannot physically follow Pip home to ensure the boy keeps his mouth shut.
Oh, right, because of the leg iron.
Exactly.
Okay.
So he outsources the terror. He creates an invisible, omnipresent threat that will follow Pip everywhere. A child's mind can rationalize running away from a man chained to the ground, but it cannot logic away an invisible monster.
Wow. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
The convict is essentially weaponizing Pip's own active imagination against him to ensure compliance.
And that invisible monster works so perfectly because Pip is already primed to expect terror from adults in his own home.
Yes, his domestic life is a nightmare.
Truly. He lives with his sister, Mrs. Jo Gargery, who is 20 years older than him, and constantly, just relentlessly boasts that she has raised him by hand.
She makes sure every single person in their village knows exactly what a burden Pip is to her. She is the architect of his daily guilt.
And her physical presence alone is designed to be intimidating. Pip constantly wonders if she washes with a nutmeg grater instead of soap, because her face is permanently red.
The nutmeg grater.
And she wears this coarse, square bib that is absolutely covered in pins and needles. It's almost like a suit of armor designed to repel affection.
Totally. And her method of discipline involves a wax-ended cane she ironically calls the tickler.
The tickler, which is so sinister.
It is. She rules that house through emotional manipulation and a constant state of aggressive, self-pitying martyrdom.
She even weaponizes domestic chores. Even the simple act of buttering a slice of bread for Pip and her husband is done with such aggressive martyrdom that she makes them feel guilty just for needing to eat.
Oh, the buttering scene.
Right. She pins the loaf to her chest, risking stabbing the bread with her own needles, mind you, slaps the butter on like a pharmacist mixing a nasty paste, and hacks it off. It's like a dictator running a hostage situation.
It really is.
Yeah.
But the stark contrast to this environment is her husband, Joe, the blacksmith.
Joe.
A gentle, blonde-haired giant of a man who serves as Pip's only real sanctuary.
Yeah, they have this wonderful secret solidarity. Like when Mrs. Joe goes on a rampage, Joe will subtly cross his fingers to silently communicate with Pip that, they are in this together.
Their secret code.
Yeah. But looking at Joe's character, he is this Hercules of a man who works at a forge all day, yet he actively hides behind his own long legs to avoid his wife's wrath. I really struggle to understand his extreme passivity here. Like, does standing by and letting his wife use the tickler on Pip make Joe complicit in the abuse?
That is such a crucial tension in the text, and it brings up a very nuanced view of the cycle of abuse.
Right.
Later on, Joe actually opens up to Pip about his own childhood.
Right.
His father was a violent alcoholic who beat Joe and his mother mercilessly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and when you understand that history, you realize Joe's passivity isn't cowardice.
It's a conscious choice.
Precisely. It stems from a deeply ingrained, almost paralyzing fear of ever inflicting the kind of pain his mother suffered. He consciously chooses to absorb his wife's abuse, to be the punching bag in the household, rather than ever raise a hand against a woman.
No.
He is desperately trying to break the cycle of violence he grew up with, even though it comes at a terrible cost to his own dignity and, unfortunately, leaves Pip somewhat unprotected.
Yeah, he absorbs the blow so Pip doesn't have to bear it all alone, but he can't shield him completely.
Exactly.
And Pip is still carrying that invisible monster in his head from the graveyard. The fear of that mythical young man wanting his liver completely overrides his fear of his sister. It actually drives Pip to steal from his only sanctuary.
He does the unthinkable.
He sneaks out and steals Joe's file, and he steals a beautiful spicy pork pie from his sister's pantry, which sets up just an agonizing ticking time bomb for the family's Christmas dinner.
Oh, the tension here is masterful. Pip is sitting at the holiday table, absolutely paralyzed by the knowledge that the missing pie will be discovered at any moment.
It feels like waiting for your parents to find a terrible report card you tried to hide, but the stakes feel infinitely higher because you've committed a literal crime.
Right, and the guests at the table just amplify that anxiety to the maximum.
Yes. You have the sycophantic church clerk, Mr. Wopsle, with his Roman nose and booming voice. You have the Hubbles, and the absolute worst of them all, Pumblechook.
Oh, Pumblechook.
He's this pompous, fish-mouthed corn merchant who constantly grills Pip with math questions in the middle of dinner, like 7 times 9, boy.
It's so awful. The guests don't treat Pip like a child at all. They treat him like a naturally wicked creature that requires constant, severe discipline.
Exactly.
They sit there eating the family's food while literally discussing Pip's inherent evil as a casual topic of conversation.
But Pip does get a brief moment of dark, accidental revenge, though.
Yes, the brandy.
Because he had to replace the brandy he stole for the convict, he filled the bottle with whatever he could find in the pantry, which happened to be medicinal tar water. Right. Pumblechook drinks it, starts choking, and practically does backflips out the door.
It provides a moment of brilliant physical comedy right in the middle of this suffocating anxiety.
It really does. But the anxiety finally peaks. Mrs. Joe announces she is going to serve the savory pork pie.
The moment of truth.
Pip knows it's over. He grabs the leg of the table, ready to run for his life, and just as she reaches the pantry, armed soldiers knock on the door.
Such a crazy timing.
Right. When I was reading this, it almost felt like a bizarre genre shift. Like we are in the middle of a domestic family squabble over a missing pie, and suddenly the military arrives. It feels like a massive overreaction, but I'm assuming the text does this to elevate the stakes for Pip.
Oh, absolutely. It elevates the stakes by seamlessly fusing Pip's private internal guilt with the crushing weight of public institutional law.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, up until this moment, Pip's crime is entirely domestic. He wronged his sister and he betrayed Joe's trust. But when the soldiers appear holding handcuffs, Pip's child mind collapses the two worlds.
So he thinks they're there for him.
He genuinely believes the king's army has marched to his house specifically to arrest him for stealing a pork pie. It makes you feel the exact entrapment and claustrophobia that is spiraling in Pip's mind.
And the reality is, the soldiers actually just need Joe, the blacksmith, to fix a broken pair of handcuffs.
Which is such a relief, but the tension doesn't drop.
No, because Joe fires up the forge, repairs them, and then the whole household joins the soldiers out in the freezing, sleet-filled marshes to hunt for the escaped convicts, and they actually find them.
They do.
But Pip's convict isn't running away. He's locked in a violent, bloody struggle in a ditch with a second convict, a man Pip saw earlier who had a badly bruised face.
Right, and this encounter reveals a massive twist that completely redefines the narrative.
How so?
Well, Pip's convict explains that he deliberately captured this second man. He surrendered his own chance at freedom in the freezing marsh just to ensure this specific enemy was dragged back to the prison ships.
Wow. And the real shocker comes immediately after that.
It does.
The convict looks at Joe and the soldiers and publicly confesses that he was the one who broke into the blacksmith's house. He claims he stole the food and the file, deliberately lying to protect Pip from any suspicion.
Right.
And Pip and the convict exchange this profound, intense look before the convict is rowed away to the dark, rust-chained prison ship, the Hulk. What exactly is the unspoken contract being forged in this exchange?
I think it represents a radical shift in Pip's moral universe. What stands out is the sheer grace of the convict's act.
Grace, from a convict.
Exactly. This man is a convicted felon, terrifying, violent, and headed back to a brutal prison. Yet he shows a deeper capacity for gratitude and protection than Pip's own sister ever has.
He takes the blame to save the boy who saved him.
The unspoken contract is one of mutual salvation. Pip saved the convict from starving, and the convict saves Pip from the wrath of his family.
Wow.
For Pip, it shatters the idea that morality is dictated by social standing. Here is a man wearing a heavy iron on his leg who acts with more honor than the respectable guests at the Christmas table.
And that realization about social standing sets the stage perfectly for the next massive shock to Pip's system, because he is sent to play at an estate called Satis House, which ironically translates to enough house.
The irony is heavy there.
Very. And the environment is the most decaying Gothic place imaginable. All the windows are bricked up. There is absolutely no sunlight. Every single clock in the house is stopped at exactly 20 minutes to 9.
It is a monument to time standing still.
Yeah, and sitting in the middle of it all is Miss Havisham. She is wearing a yellowing, decaying wedding dress with only one shoe on. Pip describes her looking like a waxwork corpse, or a skeleton that has retained its eyes.
It's deeply unsettling.
It really is. And in this creepy environment, she forces Pip to play cards with her adopted daughter, Estella. And Estella is beautiful, but she has been trained to be unbelievably haughty and cruel.
She is weaponized against it.
Yes. They play a card game called Beggar My Neighbor, and Estella just verbally dissects Pip. She mocks his coarse hands. She mocks his thick, clunky boots.
Sure.
She sneers at his working-class vocabulary because he refers to the knaves in the deck as jacks, or boys.
And this is the moment a very specific kind of poison enters Pip's bloodstream.
Oh, the poison of class shame.
Exactly. Before this day, Pip never once thought about his boots or his hands. Estella's contempt forces him to view himself through her eyes.
He completely internalizes her class prejudice. It leads to a total breakdown in the ruined brewery outside. Pip kicks the wall, he pulls his own hair, he cries out in frustration. He even experiences a terrifying hallucination of Miss Havisham hanging by her neck from a wooden beam.
The realization of his poverty hits him like a physical blow.
Yeah, it really does.
Shame is a profoundly isolating emotion. It fundamentally alters how you interact with the world because you suddenly believe you are fundamentally flawed.
And we see that isolation immediately when Pip goes home, because Pumblechook and his sister demand to know what happened at the Grand House.
And he doesn't tell them the truth.
No, instead of telling them, Pip invents the most unhinged, elaborate lies. He tells them Miss Havisham sat in a black velvet coach inside her room, waving gold flags. He claims they fed 4 giant dogs veal cutlets out of silver baskets.
It's so absurd.
It is, and my initial thought was that he was trying to protect the weird, sad reality of Miss Havisham, but given what you just said about shame, is he actually just desperately trying to protect his own newly shattered pride?
Oh, it is entirely about self-preservation.
Yeah.
I mean, if he tells the truth, that he was mocked for his boots, forced to eat like a dog in the yard, and made to feel utterly worthless, he exposes his rawest, most painful wound to Mrs. Joe and Pumblechook.
And they would absolutely use that against him.
Exactly. He knows they will only use that vulnerability to hurt him more. The extravagant lies serve as a shield against further humiliation.
But the guilt of lying to Joe, his one true friend, eventually breaks him. He sneaks into the forge and confesses to Joe that none of it was true.
And Joe is so great in this moment.
He is. In his simple, unpretentious wisdom, he grounds Pip. He tells Pip that lies are a terrible way to try and become uncommon. He says, if you can't get to be uncommon going straight, you'll never get there going crooked.
Joe represents the authentic, steady moral compass that Pip is actually about to start deeply resenting.
Right, because Pip is already resolved to become educated. He wants to scrub the coarse laborer off himself entirely.
Yes, he wants to reinvent himself.
So he leans on an orphan girl named Biddy to teach him how to read and write at a chaotic evening school run by Mr. Wopsle's great aunt. But the past refuses to stay buried.
He never does.
No. One night at the Jolly Bargeman pub, a mysterious stranger is sitting with Joe asking very pointed questions about Pip.
The stranger is testing the waters, trying to ascertain Pip's current status and connections.
And then the stranger does something that is meant only for Pip's eyes. He stirs his glass of rum and water with a file.
Not just any file.
Right, the exact tool Pip stole for his convict years ago. And before he leaves, the stranger gives Pip a shiny shilling wrapped in paper. When they get home, they realize the paper is actually 2 one-pound notes. It's a small fortune.
It is literally the ghost of the graveyard reaching out and touching him in the middle of the pub.
That's exactly what it feels like. And the collisions between his 2 worlds just keep accelerating. Pip returns to Satis' house and encounters Miss Havisham's sycophantic relatives, Camilla, Raymond, Sarah Pocket, who are just hovering like vultures waiting for her to die.
So bleak.
But then Pip wanders into the garden and gets into this bizarre, unsettling fistfight with a pale young gentleman.
Well, this scene is so fascinating because of what it reveals about the mechanisms of the class divide.
Right, because the pale boy treats violence like a polite, rule-bound sport.
Yeah.
He brings his own water bottle and a sponge. He hops around technically reciting boxing rules, but he has absolutely no real physical strength.
And
Pip, on the other hand, works in a blacksmith's forge and has grown up literally surviving his sister's physical abuse. For Pip, violence is raw survival. Pip easily and repeatedly knocks the pale boy flat on his back.
And the pale boy just cheerfully accepts it.
Yeah. He just accepts it, says Pip 1, and leaves. But this juxtaposition really struck me. Pip is trying to move up in the world, taking lessons from Biddy, fighting gentlemen, even getting a kiss from Estella after the fight. Yet the past literally stirs his drink at the pub. Is the text suggesting that upward mobility is just a trap?
It suggests that upward mobility built on a rejection of your true self is inherently flawed.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, no matter how much Pip tries to reinvent himself, no matter how many books he reads or how much he mimics the gentleman at Satis' house, his destiny remains inextricably tethered to the mud of the graveyard and the convicts.
So he can't escape it.
No. The irony is that the wealth and status he so desperately craves to impress people like Estella are secretly funded by the very criminal underworld he is trying to distance himself from.
Wow. It's the ultimate tragic irony and just a profound look at how our origins shape us no matter how far we run.
Exactly.
We followed Pip from the freezing graveyard through the terrifying domestic battlefield of his sister's kitchen and into the decaying wealth and psychological cruelty of Satis' house. We've watched a child's innocence get warped by fear and seen how the sting of class shame can alter the trajectory of the whole life.
It's a heavy journey.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this incredibly emotional and psychological journey through Pip's world.
And as we leave Pip, looking back on this pivotal time, There is a haunting reflection from the text that I think challenges all of us.
Oh,
Yeah, the narrator reflects on how one single memorable day can forge the chain of a human life. So think about your own experiences. What single, seemingly random encounter or deeply felt moment of shame or fear formed the first link of the chain, whether of iron, gold, thorns, or flowers, that pulled you to exactly where you are today?
that is such a powerful thought. Maybe it's a chain you are still building or one you are still trying to break, much like a translator inventing a whole new identity to change her destiny. Until our next deep dive together, take care of yourselves and keep asking the big questions.